Welcome to Paul's Heart. I'm Paul, author of the book Paul's Heart, Life as a Dad and a 35-Year Cancer Survivor, available on Amazon. You can also find me on YouTube on the channel at Paul's Heart, PaulsHeart. You know, of all the dates that I recognize, or as I call it, anniversarize, today marks one of the most difficult and traumatic for me, even more so than my original diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma back in 1988. At the age of 22, being told I had cancer has only left me with a surreal feeling, having survived cancer more than 35 years. Should be filled with many anniversaries and milestones. But not once did I ever allow myself to think of anything other than reaching and remaining in remission for the rest of my life. Now, that changed in April of 2008, 18 years after I was done with my treatments, when by chance I got annoyed with a pain in my chest, a tightness that I experienced multiple times a day. And this went on that I could recollect for at least 4 months, and finally reached out to my family doctor. And on a hunch, she ordered a nuclear stress test, which I had no idea what that was. As far as I could tell, she wasn't looking for anything in particular. Definitely not what would have eventually been discovered. Partway into that test, the testing was stopped as something became apparently concerning. And 36 hours later, at the age of 42, I found myself on an operating table having an emergency bypass surgery. Now, I was expected to have a triple bypass, but in the end, I only had 2 completed. As my original angiogram showed, I had what was diagnosed as a blockage of the left anterior descending artery, sometimes referred to as the LAD. The less nerdy name would be called a widowmaker. And while I would probably likely have to explain the physiology of the LAD, you can kind of get the idea without an explanation what a widowmaker references. That phone call that I made prevented what could have easily been a fatal heart attack. My doctor making the arrangement for the test instead of me making the phone call likely saved me weeks or months in delays waiting to be scheduled, as anyone who's tried to make those kinds of appointments on their own know what it's like trying to get something scheduled, sometimes having to wait months, even a year or longer. But it was the comment that was made by my newest doctor, a cardiologist, that jarred me the most that I had ever experienced, and to this day it triggers my PTSD, even more so than my experiences with cancer. It wasn't a question if I was going to die, but when. At age 42 years old, I was slapped in the face with my own mortality. Now, unlike when I went through my treatment for Hodgkin's, I did that for me. Surviving the episode with my heart, I needed to get through this for someone other than me. In fact, 2 someones. When I left my house that morning for the test, I said to my daughters, who were age 3 and 5 at the time, I love you and goodbye. And they were off to daycare and kindergarten, and I would see them after school was over. But that never happened. I didn't get that chance because everything was put into hyper motion to get me set for this emergency heart surgery the next morning. I was devastated, thinking that I would never get to see my daughters ever again. I was actually facing my mortality, though for the second time, and with the risks involved, that mortality was more imminent this time. At that time, my daughters had already had friends who had lost their father and to cardiac disease. The cause of my heart problem was not the typical cause, but rather late developing side effects from my cancer treatments. If you recall from other prior videos, I mentioned the importance of follow-ups even after your oncologist releases you. This is why. So that changed nothing in regard to the fact that my daughters could very well lose their dad. And it broke me that I could not hold them one last time before the surgery and tell them that I loved them. And it seemed to drive me all the more that I needed to get through the surgery. Now, the story's a bit more complicated than I can put into, this 10-minute video. I have plenty of more stories relating to this experience on my blog at www.paulsheart.com. I do also have a pretty lengthy chapter in my book explaining what happened. But as you can see, the story does end happily because that was in 2008. We're now in 2025. I have had other twists and turns with my health and other issues. But in the end, my daughters still have their dad, and I still have them. 17 years later, they're both now in college, and I've gotten to witness that. Now, my daughters were too young at the time to understand what was happening, back then, and conversations were kept to age-appropriate information, even when they'd been brought to the hospital 4 days following my surgery. I was still hooked up to machines with tubes coming out of me, but it was a necessary reunion to let them know that Daddy was going to be fine. And for me, I had something inside me that pulled me through this crisis that I did not know that I had. My daughters and my love for them is what got me through this. And every day I make sure that my daughters know what they mean to me, that they remind me what I mean to them, a bond between this girl dad and his daughters never to be broken. My daughters believe that I can get through anything, and so far I've been able to do that, whether by luck, whether by skill. They know that I'm their protector, and I'm there for them in any moment of need. And I do all that I can to prepare them for the world as, they continue to grow as adults. I hope that they know that from the day that they were placed in my arms, they gave me this purpose, my reason for living, unconditional love, stronger than I could ever know existed. And I don't take for granted all the extra time that I've gotten with them, the bedtimes, the birthday parties, special school dances, and of course graduations. These are all memories that I'm able to have, and so are they. And as they begin their adulthood, I hope to have more time to be their example of how they deserve to be treated, what love and safety and respect look like, and how important that needs to be to them. And as hard as this day is for me to be, I recognize this anniversary every year, just as a reminder that my life did not end with that surgery. It continued. And it's my hope that I get to celebrate more of these years. It's not easy, as I do have other health issues related to my Hodgkin's survival. But for now, they're all managed and dealt with as needed. And my daughters are now old enough and pretty much are there with me every step of the way now. And that gives me a whole other level of strength and fight, not just for me, but for them. And, my final message with this is you don't have to have experience with cancer treatments, anything like that. If you recognize this tightness in your left side of your chest, in your arm area, go to the emergency room. Okay? Let them tell you it's nothing, but if it ends up being something, you'll be glad that you went and responded. They call cardiac disease the silent killer for a reason, because you don't know that it's happening. But if you get that warning sign, get it taken care of right away. Until next time, this is Paul's Heart.